first, let's determine your employment income gap. So we're going to keep this real easy right up front. I'm going to round the numbers. Just bear with me. These are not your pension numbers, obviously, but they're common numbers, as we have helped over 10,000 people over the last 9 years, walk them through how to prepare to retire. These numbers are very similar to what we see quite often. So first, we have a pre-retirement income figure. Here in this case, while you're working, you're actually living on, let's say, $6,000 a month. Now, this is after all taxes and insurance and all the expenses. You get $6,000 a month to actually spend for housing and food and entertainment and all the different areas of your life, okay? And then when you retire, your income annuity, your federal annuity may be, say, $3,000 a month. And you can draw Social Security. Let's assume that we're dealing with someone in FERS. You CSRS folks, you can just kind of add these two numbers together if you'd like. But a Social Security check of, say, $1,500 a month. And then that will create a total income of $4,500 a month. So while employed, we're talking $6,000. In retirement, we're talking $4,500. The age question then, how am I going to handle that? Well, so again, as we look at these numbers, we see that the X marks the spot in retirement income. So we know that we're looking at a $1,500 a month gap based on this analysis. So the question is, how is this gap going to be covered? Well, you can fill this gap with, as you see on the screen, these are generally the options that you have in life in America today. You can fill the gap by using outside assets. You can withdraw from your TSP. You can reduce your expenses. That's not the fun one, right? Or you can work in retirement, which that's a bit of an oxymoron, is it not, to work in retirement? But those are the main four options that you have while you try to cover that gap. Now, just in brief, speaking about the first two, we're going to spend a good amount of time here coming. The third one, the expense reduction, I met with a lot of folks that have a gap like this, and the first thing they begin to talk about is, oh, well, I won't be traveling to work back and forth, or I will have lower clothing budget. And my comment back is, you're still going to go around dressed, right? You're not going to go around without any clothes on. And they agree they're going to wear clothes. So there's still a clothing budget in place. And the travel back and forth to work, but you want to go on trips, right? So instead of traveling to work, you're going to travel across the country. Yes, that's kind of it. And when we actually start looking at reducing expenses, it's very common that most people can't necessarily put their finger on significant reduction in expenses to make that work. So that may be you. You may have to do that. But let's walk through the other options to see if we can close the gap before we really get too serious of a note of reducing the expenses. So if you're going to take from your TSP, I'd like to illustrate how that would work currently. You have a full withdrawal form inside of the TSP. So now bear with me as we are in this progress. You have now officially retired. You have money in the TSP and you want to do something with it. You'd like to do, let's say, 3 different things with it. So here it comes. We've got a TSP valued at $560,000 for this example. And let's say you need, in this case, again, I'm not trying to tie all my numbers together throughout the program. The math is a little too complicated. I like to round my numbers to make it easier for you to follow. But the TSP, let's say you need $2,300 a month, and you need it to come from the TSP for the next 2.5 years. So you can tell the TSP, send me that money for the next 2.5 years, and that would include $69,000 worth of that 560. It would stay in the TSP, and it would come to you monthly from the program. Now, there would be a 20% mandatory withholding, because whenever you draw from the TSP, that's the way that works. Second, you want some cash now. You have some debts you want to pay off at retirement. You want to make a trip. You want to update the car. One of those big things that you just want to do the day you retire. And so you can go to the TSP and say, send me. You have to do a percentage of the balance of the account. But for this example, say $10,000. Oh, don't forget the 20% mandatory withholding. So they'll actually send you $8,000 for that big retirement party. So that's portion 2 of the money. So we've got a monthly check. We've got money in my hands. And then you might want to move the remaining portion. In this case, it was $481,000 into an IRA. Now, this is not a recommendation that you leave the TSP to go an IRA. I'm simply illustrating how the forms work. You have to determine by meeting with a financial advisor what is best for you in your case. As a CPA, I can tell you if you move money from a traditional TSP to an IRA, there would be no tax implication for doing that as long as it's done appropriately. No negative point on that. The things you have to be concerned about are investments and fees and planning perceptions. All that good stuff is why typically people would leave the TSP to go to an IRA. So again, not a recommendation, but I'm showing you how the form works. So again, your 560,000 TSP, you would set some money aside and put it into motion to get you a monthly check. You could take some money now for enjoyment or paying off debts, and you could, if you decided to, roll some portion of the money into an IRA that would then be there for you to use at some later point, if possible. So a quick, just for the people that might retire under the age of 59 and a half. The rest of you can tune me out for just a moment, but if you might retire before 59 and a half, watch this little trick. The reason I put this $2,300 a month withdrawal to come out of the account is because if you draw from your TSP before 59 and a half, there's no 10% early withdrawal penalty as long as you have separated from service in the year you turn 55 or later. So you're retiring between 55, 59 and a half, which for FERS regular employees that would be the case, or age 50 if you're special provisions, by the way. They get even an earlier range. But if you're between 55 and 59 for the typical employee, you would want to draw money not from an IRA where the 10% penalty would apply, but from the TSP where there would be no 10% penalty. So this little move here saves a penalty of about $6,900 in federal penalties because you were taking from a TSP and not from an IRA. Let's calculate your net withdrawal on taking money from the TSP. I gave you the mandatory withholding of 20%. Let's make sure we're thinking realistically about our tax code for just a moment. Again, I'm simplifying numbers. We got a $500,000 TSP, and let's say 4% is your withdrawal rate. Now this is not an earnings rate inside the TSP. This is a percentage of the money that you want to draw year over year. Again, I'm not recommending in individual case that 4% is the right amount for you to draw. It may be 3%, maybe 6%. That depends on your purpose of the money, your life expectancy, your plans. All sorts of issues factor into what your percentage withdrawal rate should be. If you were to Google what should my withdrawal rate be, you're going to find many discussions around the 4% number. So I'm going to use that here because it's commonly discussed in the financial planning world. So 4% of 500,000 is 20,000. If you had and I'm just using 20% federal tax rate, and I'll show you the tax rates in a minute, but we had to round to something. 6% that you had to pay to the state, which happens to be, I'm in Georgia, by the way, so the Georgia tax rate is 6%. I know we have people all over the country tuning in with us, and we're going to, don't worry, stay tuned. We're going to talk about multiple states, not in great detail, but I'll show you some interesting facts about them in just a moment. But we got to pay tax on that $20,000 of $5,200. So you're actually only in your pocket $14,800 on a $20,000 distribution. So remember, I know this is not good news to have this morning, but that $500,000 is not all your money. If you've been saving it in a tax-deferred vehicle, it is, and I'm in the South, so I can get away with this, it is y'all's money, meaning you and the government, the two of you together. So as you distribute the money, as you take the money, you have to pay out the government, and that leaves you with the $14,800 figure, or $1,233 per month if you were to break that down based on these calculations. Okay? So that is our income withdrawal concept that you want to have as it relates to your TSP funds. Let's now put all these pieces together. Again, the numbers don't have to match the previous screen, but I'm making the good case. We talked about $6,000 as your need that you're living on today while employed. And when you retire, you're going to get a $3,000 federal annuity. You're going to get $1,500 a month Social Security. And then your TSP could withdraw a net or $1,167 could be the withdrawal from a TSP. That adds up to a retirement income of $5,667. compared to the $6,000, we have a $333 a month shortfall. So we closed the gap. See, we had this big gap and we began to close it. Now we're down to other assets that you may have, reducing expenses, or working in retirement. So before you can retire, if this was your situation and we were having an individual conversation, I would say before you can retire, you got to figure out how to live on $300 less, or figure out where you're going to get that extra $300 a month from if you're living on the $6,000 that you're making today while employed. And I will tell you, when people have many a times told me, oh, I can do this, I can reduce expenses, my comment is to you, do it now. If you say you can reduce your expenses and live on less in retirement, then do it 6 months, and do it for a 6-month window sometime before you retire. And that'll tell you the truth if you really can, or if you just thought you could. And you may decide at that point, I've had people do this, come back and say, no, I'm going to work another year or two because I don't like the adjustments to my lifestyle to live within that new level of income. So practical application of this is live on the income that you're going to have in retirement now so that the adjustment is easier when you do retire, or you realize that you're not ready to retire until you have saved more money, you worked more years to get a bigger pension, or made some other adjustment. Now, I will say here, sometimes we do get the conversation about your mortgage, because your number one expense, if you still have a mortgage, it's your biggest line item. And we have had people say, well, when I retire, I'm just going to take that $100,000 out of my TSP and pay off my $100,000 mortgage. Number one, you're not going to take $100 from your TSP and pay $100 because taxes, right? You're going to take $140,000 out of your TSP to pay a $100,000 mortgage. And the $40,000 is going to go to the government. Be careful when you have large withdrawals from your TSP that it throws you in additional tax brackets potentially. You want to examine that and make sure that you are not drawing so much out in 1 year that it hurts you tax-wise. And maybe you can draw for a few years, maybe a 5-year plan to pay off that mortgage, and not necessarily all in 1 year.